Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Sorry for the silence and sorry for the late start. We were still dealing with some technical issues. So we are starting our session, and don't forget to share, don't forget to invite others. And again, don't forget to say hello so that we know who's joining us today. Thank you very much for those that have already joined. We see you, Ria. Long time, Sisi, you had disappeared on us. We welcome you back, my sister. Please do share and invite others to join this session with us. So, Sean, we are going to start. Let me apologize because Sean's camera somehow is not appearing on our stream. We've been trying to sort that out and we failed. So we've decided that it's still important for us to have this session. So you'll only hear Sean's voice and not see his face, but it's still Sean. So at least we are still getting, the quality that we always get from him. So we're going to open with a word of prayer and from there hit the ground. So let us close our eyes and start the session. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you once more for this opportunity, Lord, to come before your throne of grace, to come in your presence, Lord, as we always do. We invite you, Spirit of the living God, to guide us, to be the one that gives us ears that will listen and hearts that will be willing to learn, hearts that will be willing to be challenged and to change things in our lives that your word encourages us to change. As we sit today to discuss relationships, Lord, we know that a relationship with you is the first and the most important that we need to have, because out of that flows beautiful things of life. We thank you, Lord, for the relationship that you have built with us through sacrificing your son Jesus, who died on the cross so that we may be reconciled back to you, Lord. We thank you for everything. Bless all of us who are sitting in this session and bless our families, oh God. And we ask that you also bless Sean as the one who's going to take us through what he has prepared for us. We ask all this, trusting and believing in you always, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're going to start, but before we start, Sean, I think, when you sent through the topic, I actually reflected, Horkana, our lives, are based on relationships, whether it's a relationship with your siblings, with your parents, with a partner, a spouse, everywhere where you live, your life is based on the type of relationships that you have. You can never exist without any form of a relationship. I know how some people see their relationships as blessings, and you have some people who see their relationships as curses. All of us do have relationships. It doesn't matter what time. And the one thing that I know as someone who's in different relationships, with my sisters, with my mom, with my children, with my partner, with colleagues at work, with friends, I know the challenges that come with these relationships. Some really stretches you. They take you to where you say, I have reached my end point. Some are so warm. That's your safe space. That's where you run to when things get hard. So there is something about relationships that either makes or breaks us. And there is something about relationships that make them important and a necessary part of life. So I want to hear from you, what about relationships should we be handling different? Because remember, in these sessions that we do with you, we always talk about learning, unlearning, relearning. So I'm looking forward to today's session, and maybe you can even, tell us what inspired this, topic that you gave us today. So over to you, and may we all enjoy today's service.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody that has taken the time to join this call. I know that we are busy wherever we are. We've got so many things going on. So I am truly honored that you chose to be a part of this particular session. And I pray that it be as useful to you as it is useful to me when I'm delivering it. So, why relationships? Relationships because the very definition of what it means to be human is relationships. Human beings are what we call social animals. We strive to connect to other people. We thrive on connections with other people, be they family members, friends, etc. And all of us want to be attached to other people. Again, whether it be family members, whether it be partners, whatsoever, which is why there's that English saying, no man or woman is an island. We're connected
Yeah.
to certain individuals. And that connection is a predeterminant factor when it comes to our mental well being. The valuable connections you have determine whether or not you become mentally ill or you become mentally well. If you have relationships that are not going in the way that they're supposed to go, that predisposes you to mental illnesses. In fact, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about how I've seen people in relationships that have broken them, relationships that have resulted in them being in mental asylums, relationships that have resulted in them losing who they are, relationships that have resulted in them being unable to use their talents, their gifts, and their abilities. But I was also reflecting on relationships that I've witnessed that have made people grow, that have helped people to heal, that have helped people to find themselves, and that have helped people to work through traumatic situations that they would have gone through simply because of the beautiful and fulfilling relationships that they have. Needless to say, when we are loved right, we thrive. And when there is a lack of love, we're in danger. It's as simple as that. So let's go into it. What is a relationship? It's the way in which two people are connected. I was zoning in more on the romantic part of relationships, primarily because I feel the church has to some degree neglected the important aspect of romantic relationships, what they are, and what we need to do for them to work in the way that they must. We automatically assume that people know, which is why we're seeing an exponential increase in the divorce rate, which is why we're also seeing issues of infidelity, etc. So, a relationship, in essence, is the way in which two people are connected, but it's also the way in which two people relate to each other and behave towards each other. So, automatically, if you're in a relationship, ask yourself, in what way are you connected to your partner? In what way do you relate to your partner? And how do you behave towards your partner? Again, because many of us are so used to just pointing the fingers, right, at the next party. This is who I am and this is what I do. But we never stop to look at, but what is my contribution to this entire equation? And then the third part is that these relationships are characterized by feelings of love and attraction for another person. So we're connected, we relate to each other, we behave in a specific way towards each other. But over and above that, there are feelings of love and there is attraction for the other party. So that's important for us to understand what governs relationships. Connection. So if you're not connected to your partner, is it actually even a relationship to begin with? If you're not relating to your partner, and if you're not behaving in specific ways towards your partner, if there are no feelings of love, if there is no attraction, is it actually even a relationship? I think not. Now, what are the building blocks for us to then say, okay, what is a relationship and what isn't? First and foremost, trust. Can I trust that when I'm with this particular individual, I can let my guard down psychologically, even physically, because I trust them enough to know that they have my best interest at heart. I trust them with my life. I trust them with my pain. I trust them with my fears. And I trust them with my dreams, my hopes, my goals, and my aspirations. So trust becomes a major part of it. And when it comes to relationships, bear in mind, when a new relationship starts, everyone is at 100. The things that you do in that relationship then determine whether the trust levels are going to remain at 100 or they're going to be reduced as the days go by until they get to a point where there is zero trust because of so many breaches of trust. And usually that's how relationships end, a lack of trust. This lack of trust doesn't happen in one day, by the way. It happens over and over again. The little things that you don't do that you're supposed to do, the promises that you make that you don't keep, the times you don't communicate when you're supposed to communicate, the times where there are periods of silence in that relationship, where there are many of these fights where instead of dealing with the problem, we start attacking one another. That's what destroys trust. And then the second thing is that there should be commitment. Now, what is commitment? I want to give an example of today. I agreed to do this session, and when I agreed to do this session, turns out today I'm not feeling so great. I am not 100%. But because I know I committed, I put aside to some degree whatever feelings I have, whether it's pain, physical pain that I'm going through, and I remember the commitment. Because at the end of the day, commitment is what it takes to build a relationship. So, are you committed to your particular partner? And by commitment, we're referring to even in their absence, are you committed? So, commitment isn't limited to things such as fidelity, trust. It also involves things such as when the days are dark and the friends are few, do you remember the commitment you made to this person? But commitment, and I need to be clear here, commitment starts with you committing to yourself before you commit to anyone else. And then it evolves into you committing to another individual. Because if you cannot commit to yourself, and what do you mean by commit to yourself? If you don't commit to being a good individual, if you don't commit to improving as an individual, if you don't commit to healing as an individual, if you don't commit to learning and understanding who you are as an individual, there is no way you're going to be able to commit to someone fully. And there's no way that that commitment is going to be genuine if you're not committed to yourself first. So we commit to ourselves first, and then by extension, we commit to the people that we choose to love. We commit to being good people. We commit to improving in areas that we lack in. We commit to learning. We commit to unlearning. We commit to relearning. That's important. So anytime you hear anyone in a relationship saying, yeah, Mara, this is just who I am, already, that means that person is not committed. Firstly, they're not committed to themselves, but also they're not committed to that particular individual in terms of doing better for this individual and for themselves. Then another major thing that we neglect is intimacy. Now, intimacy is not limited to sexual activity. We need to be clear there. Intimacy for me actually involves quality time. That time where both of you are just lying on the floor, you're talking nonsense, there's nothing great that's going on except for all of these silly conversations. But it also involves those conversations on the fireside where we're discussing the future and what we're going to do and what our plans are. It involves those walks that we take in nature together where we're connecting soul to soul. And yes, it also involves sex itself, because that's a major, major contributory factor when we look at why relationships fail. So now we're talking about committed relationships, people that are married, etc. When there is a lack of intimacy, automatically there's a lack of connection. And when there is a lack of connection, automatically the amount of love that's there dissipates and it gets lowered. So intimacy is a good aspect, and it's a major, major building block when it comes to relationships. Intimacy could also be as simple as playing chess together, or watching a specific movie together, or going to take a shower together. Simple things like that are what builds into what intimacy ultimately is. And then another major important part is vulnerability. Do you showcase vulnerability? And Sesfena mentioned something important when she said some people, their relationships are their safe space. That's actually how it ought to be. When you go out into the world, you are exposed to the pressures of what is happening at work, the pressures of everything that is happening around us. Your particular relationship should be your safe space. It should be that one space where you can be yourself, that one space where you know for a fact that even though things are not going as great, there is this one individual who chooses you and loves you nonetheless. So there's no reason why you should be performative. There's no reason why you should put on a show. You should just be yourself. And vulnerability includes expressing myself emotionally, whether as a man or as a woman. When I'm not fine, when I am fine, I need to be able to communicate those particular feelings, those particular emotions. When you are failing to be vulnerable with your partner, two things are potentially happening. Either they have not created a safe space within this relationship for me to express my vulnerability because they are highly judgmental. And each time I express my vulnerability, I get laughed at, I get demeaned, I get belittled. So I learn not to express my vulnerability. Or it's a me problem in the sense that I just struggle with emotional expression. And I need to learn how to communicate my emotions better and in a clear way that my partner understands. So vulnerability is important. Over and above that, we then have mutual respect. Now, mutual respect in the sense that respect, as we say, is earned, it's not given, it's not granted, it's not a right. But this respect that we're speaking of goes both ways. So you cannot expect respect when you don't give respect, in other words. And respect then also means even when we are arguing, even when you're not my favorite person at that moment in time, I'm going to remember the fact that I respect you. And because I respect you, even as we deal with whatever conflict we're going through, we're going to do it in a respectful way that does not do any damage to either one of us. I am not going to swear at you. I'm not going to hit you. I'm not going to demean you. I'm not going to dismiss your particular feelings or your particular emotions. Because I respect you first as an individual, secondly, as a person that I love. So mutual respect then becomes another important building block. Effective communication is another one. Bearing in mind, the reason why I put the verbal vis-a-vis non-verbal is that as social scientists, well, we're not quite agreed. We're still arguing about this one. Some would say to you 65% of all communication is non-verbal. Some would say to you it's as high as 75% or 80% of communication. It's non-verbal. So it's your body language, it's your gestures, it's the way you look at someone, it's the way that you position your body when someone is speaking to you. You are actually communicating in many more ways than the words that you use. So be mindful of that. When someone says to you, listen, I need your help, the kind of reaction that you give, the way that your body postures are, tells that person whether you're actually interested in what they're saying or you are pretending to be listening to what they're saying. And that makes it then difficult for that person to communicate clearly because at that particular moment in time, your body posture is suggesting that you're uninterested in what this individual is saying. And then when I included the words effective communication, I wanted it to be explicitly clear, rather, that communication is not about me, the communicator. Communication is about the receiver of whatever it is that I'm communicating. So when I'm encoding my message to pass it on to the person I'm communicating to, or the recipient of that message who is supposed to decode that message, I need to bear in mind whether they're in the right state of mind to be able to understand the message, whether the message I'm communicating is clear enough and there's no ambiguity in it, there are no double meanings in it, such that they can fully understand what I'm saying. That's what we call effective communication. But I also need to think on behalf of this person. Are they in a space to be able to understand that which I'm trying to communicate at this particular moment? And I'll give an example. If I come home from work, I've had a terrible day, and I walk into the house, and the wife says she's had the best day ever. And she wants to talk to me about the best day she's had. Because of the fact that I love her, firstly, I'm going to let her express the positiveness of her day. I may very well even park the negative day I had because I'm not trying to break her spirit in the first instance. But also, secondly, she's in such a happy mode or happy mood such that I feel she deserves to express herself, communicate with me about how that particular day went. And then later on, I can share how my day went, even if it's the next day. It's a part of the little sacrifices we make when we love people. So effective communication becomes a major part of that. And then we have empathy. Now, empathy is essentially me putting myself in the other person's shoes. And it cuts across all of these building blocks that we're discussing. If I am empathetic, it means before I do something, my mind goes into the mode where it says, would my partner appreciate what I'm about to do? The way I want to communicate or the way I've communicated with them, the way I raise my voice, do they appreciate that or not? The way that I have not paid particular attention to them when they were raising something that's of importance to them, would they appreciate that or not? So it's essentially placing yourself in the shoes of another as a way of guiding your behavior with regards to that particular individual. And this is where many of us fail. And this is why relationships are hard, because not many of us have the skill or the gift of empathy. Not many of us think on someone else's behalf. Not many of us are able to place ourselves in somebody else's shoes before we say or do certain things. And not many of us actually even take the time to pause before we act, reflect on whatever it is that we want to do, and think of the possible ramifications or the possible impact of that which we want to do. And this is why many of us are in trouble. And then we have equality. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole gender divide and the whole debate about equality, equity, blah, blah, blah. The long and short of this is that relationships are a give and take. There should be reciprocity. So I'm speaking of equality in the sense of reciprocity. If we have children, they are my responsibility in as much as they are my wife's responsibility. So now I cannot sit and say, yeah, this is a thing for women or this is a thing for men. Because at the end of the day, the two of us made a decision to be together, to build this particular relationship. So for me, it goes without saying that we're going to try and make sure that whatever tasks and whatever functions are necessary for the maintenance of this relationship, we share them equally. Now, when we speak of sharing equally, that's where things get tricky because people want to, be political about it. Some don't believe in gender equality. Some do. Some want to use the Bible as a way of, fomenting and forwarding patriarchy. But the truth of the matter is, when you love a person, you actually don't count the amount of things you do. So when we say apportioning tasks, what we're referring to is the fact that I do what I am able to do. I help out as much as possible, in as much as she does whatever she's able to do, and she helps out as much as possible. Some couples actually do everything together, which is also great because it helps with their connection and with their intimacy. So, whatever it is that you do, understand the fact that for this particular relationship to work, both of you have some heavy lifting to do. It shouldn't be done by one party because that's where resentment creeps in. If I wake up one day and realize, but I do everything around here. I need to make sure the kids are sorted. I need to make sure the house is clean. I need to make sure that everybody is fed. Meanwhile, the other party is having a time of their lives. They're going out every night with friends and whatsoever. They are not fully present in the home. They use excuses such as I'm busy at work. They've got all of these many stories that they cook up as a way of not being fully engaged. Automatically, that's how resentment builds up. That's how people end up in situations where they grow apart. Because the one party eventually gets to a point where they feel they've done enough of the heavy lifting, they are exhausted, they cannot cope anymore. And ultimately, self preservation kicks in. And then the other thing that's important with regards to building relationships is intentionality. What is the intention behind whatever it is that you're doing, whatever relationship that you're forming, whether it's a friendship or it's a romantic relationship? What is the intention behind? The problem with the majority of us is that we fall in love. And I'm using those words quite that term quite loosely and quite intentionally. Now, when you fall out of love, if you've ever been in a physics class, you would know that for every action there is an opposite and equal reaction. So when you fall in, at some point you will fall out. It's as clear as that. And so that's why I'm not a firm believer in, yeah, and then we fell in love, etc., etc. Because my next question then becomes, okay, when are you falling out? Because you've fallen in. And falling in also does not denote intention. It's almost like there's a whirlwind that came and then it just swept you, and then wawela ka relationship, right? So there was no intention behind the formation of that relationship. Now, I'm not dismissing romance. I'm not dismissing the mystery that is love or the mystery that is romance. I'm not dismissing that. But I'm saying if we're building genuine relationships where there is serious commitment, healthy relationships, there should be some level of intentionality. Yes, I may feel that whirlwind, those butterflies that we get when you've met somebody that's new, that's exciting, somebody that you think is so beautiful, they probably don't go to the bathroom, things like that. But at the end of the day, you need to ask yourself, what is the intention? And there's a thing I tell people now that love used to be blind, now it sees, right? A lot of the times people used to be swept up by romance, but now people are choosing with intention, which in my opinion is a good thing. You need to be intentional. Why do you need to be intentional? Because when you choose to love someone, for me that's the highest form of commitment, because it means if that person wakes up one day and they've lost everything that makes them attractive, I'm still going to be able to be there because I chose to be there. It's opposed to me falling in love. Because falling in love for me means that there are certain exterior variables that I looked at and that I found attractive, hence I fell. The absence of those variables potentially then means I'm going to fall out because those things that attracted me initially are no longer there. And I need you to understand this and master this. Human beings, I always say this, I know, human beings are not finished products. They're in the process of becoming. So it may very well be that what you fall in love with later evolves into something that you don't quite understand. And when that happens, that's where we see now why 45% of marriages in South Africa end in divorce before 10 years. Because sometimes people reveal themselves over the years. You find out the person that you thought you're married to, or the person that you thought they are, is completely different from the monster that's in front of you. But also sometimes it's because you realize that whatever it is that they sold you was a complete lie. Sometimes it's also because they have not maintained that particular relationship. Uh, the two parties involved have not maintained that particular relationship. And that's why, for me, relationships that are started out of choice are more meaningful as opposed to relationships that happen by chance or that happen because someone fell in. Because someone will fall out at some point. Okay. Now, before we go into serious commitment issues and all of that, part of the reason why relationships end up failing is because we don't do the groundwork. Because, in my opinion, when you're building a relationship, it's akin to building a house or a structure of any sort, whether it's a theater, whether a shop that you're building. There are foundations that go into it and certain foundational principles that go into it, the absence of which spells doom and disaster for this particular relationship. So, foundational conversations for me start at who are you? So this is you trying to build a relationship with this individual. Firstly, try and understand who are they. And when I say who are they, I'm not referring to their name, their biographical information, age, etc., the work they do. No. When we take away all of that, who and what remains? What values do they subscribe to? What principles do they subscribe to? Right? But over and above that, what family do they come from? Because some of you do not know, but if you had taken time to study your partner's family, you would have known it was a bad idea to be with them. Why? Every family has certain generational illnesses, we can even call them generational curses, that flow within the bloodline. In the same way that every family has specific physical illnesses that flow within the bloodline. In the same way that every family has specific spiritual illnesses that flow within the bloodline. So before you even choose to connect to someone and to commit to someone, this is a part of the things that you have to understand. Generational curses, you will find there are certain families where the people never get married. All the women in that particular family never get married. They get impregnated, and that's the end of it. But you also find there are certain families where maybe all the men in that family are womanizers, or all the men in that family are alcoholics. And if you look at your particular family, trust you me, if you are observant enough, you will know what the particular illnesses in your family are. So I want us to be fair. As you are asking this person all of these questions, you also need to have answers to these particular questions with regards to yourself and your own family. Then you need to also understand what physical illnesses flow within that particular family. Is it cancer? Is it asthma? Is it high blood pressure? Why? Because by virtue of this person coming from that specific family, they are already predisposed to suffer from the same illness. So you may want to know what those illnesses are and actually help them prevent such illnesses from occurring or heal from such illnesses. Another thing we need to zone in on, what are you healing from as an individual? So, in other words, what personal traumas have you been through in the past? And in what way have these personal traumas shaped the person that you are today? Because if I don't know what personal traumas my partner has been through, I may love her in a specific way, thinking that I am loving her right. Kanti, I'm triggering her because of all of her unresolved personal traumas. So it's important to understand what a person is healing from, because that shows you and tells you what sort of behavior they're going to exhibit in that relationship. And you then need to make a choice as to whether you are able to live with that fact, whether you're able to help them heal, or whether you feel that's not your responsibility. And then we need to zone in on what are their love languages. So, in other words, what is it that speaks to them? What is it that you have to do for them to feel loved, for them to feel understood, and then for them to be able to understand that you are expressing how much you love them? For some people, it's gifts. For some people, it's acts of service. For some people, it's being generous. For some people, it's different things. So your job is to understand what your particular um, partner's love language is. For some people, it's touch, physical touch. So now imagine if I don't understand what my partner's love language is, maybe it's physical touch, and maybe I'm somebody that struggles with expressing my affection or public displays of affection. So we could very well go through a period where my partner actually feels I'm not loving them the way they want to be loved. And they would be correct to think that or to assume that. But if we have these conversations at the beginning of relationships, then we avoid falling into such traps. And then the next thing then becomes, is your partner emotionally intelligent? Now, emotional intelligence relates to your ability to understand, be aware of, manage, and control and express your particular feelings and your particular emotions and your particular behavior. So, an example would be when they're under a lot of pressure or strain or stress, how do they react to that? Do they become rude and dismissive? Do they become somebody that shuts everybody else out? They withdraw from that particular relationship? Are they somebody that's actually emotionally expressive, that's able to express how they feel at any moment in time, which would be great then for the levels of communication and the quality of communication in that relationship. Over and above that, we then look at where is your life going? What is your vision for your own life? And then I then need to ask myself, if your vision is to become a pastor, for example, is it aligned to my own personal vision? And am I able to support your particular vision? Because understand this, relationships are about helping each other become the best possible versions of ourselves. Relationships are not about sacrificing our goals and our dreams for the sake of other people. No. They're about making sure that we provide a safe space for each other to grow together, but also to grow individually, to utilize our talents and our abilities, and to succeed individually, but also collectively in the relationship. So if I don't know where my life is going as an individual, I have no business being with someone else's daughter. Because where am I leading this young woman to if I don't know the direction my life is going? Equally so, if she doesn't know where her life is going, then she has no business trying to find a partner because she needs to figure out where her life is going first before making the decision to be with someone. Then another important relationship conversation we need to have is money. What is your relationship with money? Are you a spender? Are you a saver? What are you? And what informs your relationship with money? For some people who a lot of the times grow up in poor circumstances, it works in one of two ways. Either they become very thrifty to the point where they are actually financially abusive, they monitor every single cent and where it goes under the guise of being financially literate, or they become extravagant and they spend way too much, which they shouldn't be doing. So the question becomes, what is your relationship with money? And we might as well add under that conversation, what is your credit record like? Are you blacklisted or not? Because if we end up together and I am not aware that you're blacklisted, automatically that's going to serve as a blockage in our relationship at some point with regards to the acquiring of assets, etc. Over and above that, what is your relationship with money and what is your relationship with the money that you spend on your family? Are they overly dependent on you or are they independent people? What is it? Because these are, and I wrote these quite intentionally because these are many of the reasons why people end up fighting in relationships because these discussions are not held, the groundwork is not done. We're too focused on the butterflies that we feel and the fact that the person we're with is tall, dark, and handsome, or if they're female, they're yellow and mellow and they're pretty, and it ends there. And we forget beauty itself cannot sustain a relationship. So we need to have all of these conversations. The question then also becomes how do you handle conflict? So when we're not okay in that particular relationship, how do we handle that as a couple? Are we the type that doesn't speak to each other for months? Are we the type that then doesn't see eye to eye? Are we the type that resolves it immediately? Conflict resolution strategies are important because conflict in and of itself is not a problem. It's not a negative thing. When I consult for corporates and all of that, I always make that point that actually conflict could be a good thing in a team or even in a relationship because sometimes it brings to the fore certain issues that have not been discussed or that were under the carpet. So some undercurrents, they're brought out into the open so that we're able to deal with them. The question is, when there is a conflict, how do you manage that and make sure that it's healthy conflict? So my take is that it should never degenerate into personal attacks. It should never degenerate into being dismissive of how someone feels. It should never degenerate into disrespecting someone. And we should always remember, even when we're in conflict, that we chose to be together, we love each other. So the focus should be on the problem rather than on attacking each other. The next question then becomes, what is your particular purpose? I guess it's linked to where's your life going. Because if your purpose in life is to speak on podiums and to heal nations and to heal people, and my purpose, it doesn't have to be the same, by the way, but my purpose is in a completely different direction such that we are unable to coexist, then that relationship is doomed to fail. So we need to rethink that. But if there is a way in which we can align our purposes, and bear in mind, I say the purposes do not have to be the same, but they need to at some point speak to each other so that we're able to have this peaceful coexistence and we're able to work with each other and to support each other to be the best possible versions of ourselves. And then another important part that we need to discuss: culture, tradition, religion. What particular religion do you subscribe to? What particular faith do you belong to? And what are the prescripts of that particular faith? And what are the expectations that govern relationships according to that faith? The same with culture. Yes, we don't have to be from the same cultural background, but are we both progressive enough to be accepting of the other person's culture, to be accepting and to come up with our own way of doing things? Because it cannot just be my way or my partner's way. We need a hybrid system within which we look at the things that we feel would work for us from my culture, but also the things that we feel would work for us from her culture, and then we design our own. Because I can tell you now, as a student of anthropology, culture is dynamic. It's not static. It's not cast in stone. It's forever changing because it's a way of life. So as the days roll by, our ways of living also change, which is why culture changes. Okay. So I'm hoping that we're still together. So what next? If I'm planning on getting into a relationship, what's the next step? Or if I'm in one, but it's not going in the way that I wanted to, firstly, get to know yourself first. Everything begins and ends with you. Why? You cannot give what you don't have. What does that mean? I will not be able to love if I don't love myself. It's that simple. So I need to get to know myself first, understand my strengths, understand my weaknesses, work on my toxic traits and my negative habits, improve upon them, work on developing discipline, work on communicating effectively, and then and only then should I then start investing time in getting to know the other person. Because if I rush into knowing the other person without knowing myself, that's where sometimes you lose yourself in a relationship and you think it's love. Can't you know you've actually lost yourself because you never knew yourself in the first place? And then one day you wake up, you realize how. But this relationship is actually just structured in such a way that favors the other party. My needs are not taken care of. My interests are not taken care of. I am never considered. My feelings are not considered. My emotions are not considered. Everything is about the other party. That could very well be because you took time to know them without knowing yourself first, without setting boundaries first, without understanding yourself first, without understanding what your needs are. And so they took advantage of your ignorance and they forwarded their agenda, and it became about that relationship satisfying their needs as opposed to yours. So get to know yourself first. You owe it to yourself to know yourself first, and then get to know the other person. Having done that, then develop a relationship blueprint or a roadmap. How is this going to work? What governs this relationship? Put structures in place. Because if you don't, it is going to come back and bite you. It's as simple as that. So make sure that you develop a relationship blueprint. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Who does what? When? How? That's important. So you may then be asking, okay, we've heard that. How then do we enrich our relationship? Firstly, build a friendship. It has always been my personal belief that the greatest relationships or love affairs are developed out of friendships. Because when you are friends with someone, you are able to understand who they are, what they're about, what their feelings are, what their emotions are, what their fears are. There are no sacred cows between you and this particular individual because you're friends. And I think that that makes for one of the greatest attributes of healthy relationships. Second thing, stay connected. We live in a busy world. We're forever traveling, we're forever working, trying to make ends meet. And so it's quite easy to grow apart. So we need to be intentional about staying connected. Date nights, going to massages together, going to the movies together, or watching movies together, spending quality time together, having conversations, checking in on each other. That's important. Get physical. That's referring to intimacy. And I made mention of intimacy earlier on, so I'm not going to repeat that. Celebrate each other as much as you can, but also master the art of listening twice as much as you speak. Because there's a difference between listening to understand and listening to respond. And the healthy thing to do is to listen to understand where the other party is coming from, what their thoughts and their feelings and their emotions are, and then responding to that. Maintain your sense of self. So, in other words, I made mention of the fact that relationships are not about disappearing into the other person, right? Relationships are essentially about helping each other become the best possible version of ourselves. So, you need to maintain your individuality. So, it's okay to have those friends outside of your relationship. It's okay to have interests outside of that relationship. And it's actually wise from time to time to spend time apart because that helps for us to develop as individuals and it makes us happier, healthier individuals so that when we come together, whatever we're building actually works even better because we both know who we are and we're both fulfilled in who we are and where we're going. So maintain your sense of self, spend quality time together. I don't need to explain this because we've spoken about this, but also fight well. Now, when we speak about fighting well, we're saying target the problem as opposed to the person. So it should never become about attacking the other party. If there is a problem, let's look at the problem and solve it. Let's look at it for what it is and solve it. Instead of zoning in on attacking each other, and taking away from what that relationship is supposed to be. So let's fight well. But also, let's carry out self introspection. So, self introspection would entail me sitting and asking myself, how well am I doing as a partner? Are there things I need to improve upon? Are there things I need to do differently? And over and above self introspection, let's also learn about doing a service user audit. So, a service user audit is essentially a self introspection. Remember, it's you looking at yourself and how you are loving this person and whether you're doing it right, etc. But a service user audit is you asking this person to appraise or evaluate how well you're doing, right? So, from time to time, find out from your partner, am I being the best possible partner that I need to be? Are there things that I need to improve upon? You need to be humble when they give you feedback. Do not be defensive because remember, they're giving you their experience of you. So you may be sitting wherever you're sitting and thinking, yo, I'm the greatest partner ever. They're very lucky to have me. But their experience of you might be very different. And they may actually be thinking, yo, this person is so self absorbed and so selfish and so self centered. And there's so many things that are wrong with this particular relationship. So you wouldn't know that unless if you ask them to appraise you or to evaluate you. The same applies even when you're a parent. You may think you're the best parent out there, but your children might have a different take altogether. So if you genuinely love a person, be willing to be audited in terms of how you're doing in that relationship. And be willing and humble enough to learn when they want you to do better without feeling the need to be defensive or being argumentative about things. Okay. So, some practical steps that we can take to build it in the right way and to keep it alive. Learn something new about your partner. Designate a monthly date night and schedule a check in. So, check in on them, check in on each other. But also remember the small things. If you get up because you want to have an ice cream in the middle of the night and they happen to be awake, offer them one. When you go and make yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, offer them one. If you go and you know they're about to take their bath and you have the time, offer to run the bath for them. It's the small things that culminate in the big things and that ultimately determine the quality of a relationship. So remember the small things. Show affection. Let this person understand and know just how much you love them. They shouldn't assume because you have couples where the words I love you were last used on their wedding day and they assume that the other party feels or knows that they are loved. But what if that other party's love language is words of affirmation, which means they want to or need to hear it regularly from you? So show affection. Learn and understand your partner's boundaries and respect the fact that they're an individual that deserves to be respected and an individual that deserves space to be an individual in as much as they are part of a relationship. Laugh together, but almost always remember that the two of you are the most important in this equation, even if they're children. A lot of the times I work with couples and they tell me, yeah, no, we're doing this for the children. I'm like, yeah, you've already failed if you if you're doing it for the children. Because when you met, there were no children. So it was never meant to be about the children. It has always been about the two of you and should always be about the two of you before everything else. Discuss finances. I made mention of why that is important. So as we finalize, just some nuggets to get you thinking. Understand if you don't spend quality time with your partner, someone else will. I don't know who that someone else is going to be. And I'm not suggesting that they're going to cheat, but just understand if you don't spend quality time with your partner, someone else will. Understand that we are most alive when we are in love. So, love is a beautiful thing. And if you have love, you have everything you need. Look at how confident you feel when your relationship is going in the right way and you wake up next to the person that you love, and you leave the house after being told how beautiful you are, or how handsome you are, or how good you look that day. Look at how that gives you an extra step, an extra spring in your step, rather. That is, ladies and gentlemen, the power of love. And that's why we're saying when you have love, you have everything. You have confidence, you have self belief, simply because you're being loved in the way that you want to be loved. For the purposes of time, I'm going to open it up to the floor for any comments, contributions, questions. Back to our lovely chair so that she facilitates that.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was a mouthful. I mean, you really delved into it, you deep dived into it, and thank you for that. There are two questions. I think one is more a comment and the other one is a question. So without me, repeating everything you've said, I want to go to Sis Brenda's comment. And thank you, Sis Brenda, for being vulnerable with us and sharing, what you are going through and what your experience is. Sis Brenda is saying, my mother divorced when I was 6 years. Until
Mm,
that day, she never dated, and I had bad. I had a bad ending relationship since 2021. I'm
mm.
afraid that I might be falling in that trap. I have totally withdrawn from relationships. I don't have interest. I don't see myself dating again. Is this normal?
So you've grown around a situation in which there was no love, primarily because of the traumatic divorce that she would have gone through, that your mother would have gone through. But over and above that, you also have been through some difficult relationships. Now, it can be normal if you choose to make it normal. That's as simple as it is. The one thing you have to do is to actually just sit and say, what is it about relationships that I am so unhappy with? Is it the fact that the past relationship did not go in the way that it was supposed to go in? Is it the fact that I was betrayed and I was hurt and I was disappointed and I was rejected? If it's that, then deal with that rejection, deal with that disappointment at that level. But you cannot allow that to be your life. You cannot allow whatever traumatic situations you've been through to determine the rest of your life. Because what it essentially means is, like we always speak about, you are now losing your identity because of the trauma you've been through, and you're taking your trauma and you're making it your identity. And yet, the things that happen to you are not you. You still exist outside of the things that happen to you as an individual. And so, what I'm seeing is that there needs to be healing. There needs to be healing in the sense that, yes, already there is a pattern that's been created in the sense that mother gets divorced, and then to me, I then normalize being a hyper independent person because I've seen my mother doing it, raised us up herself, for example, and took care of us herself, did not need any kind of man. So that gets ingrained in my head, Uguti, well, I can do everything by myself, which is not a problem. But it becomes a problem when you're now blocking love simply because you believe that you can do everything by yourself, or you believe that love isn't real, or you believe that things would never work out on your end. So it's all
Thank you.
about healing.
Yeah. Sis Brenda, I've put Sean's details, his email address, both his email addresses and his Instagram. If you feel you need to really, go through a process of healing, please contact Sean and the two of you can, agree on how he helps you get through it. I do agree with him. You cannot close yourself to love because of one bad experience. Love is a beautiful thing. And like I said, we do need, to be loved, and we do need to love. I think that's just how we were created as human beings. But when love has hurt us to the point where we don't want anything to do with it, I think we need to go back and reflect, as Sean was saying, not define ourselves with those bad experiences, but to look at what else is there, you know? And I know it's scary to put yourself out there again when you've really been hurt. Let's go to what Ausintabi is also saying. um, she says sometimes, and I think she was responding to the point you made, Sean, around knowing yourself in a relationship. And she's saying sometimes, even if you know yourself, you know, in a relationship, people hide their narcissistic traits where very well until they pin you down in marriage. And then, boom, you get a shock of your life. There are master con men and women who use relationships to advance their selfish needs. That's a
That is very
loaded
true.
statement. Yeah.
Very true. And it's one of the most hurtful things ever. But my personal belief is this: I do not believe in staying in situations where you are not being loved in the way that you should be loved.
Mm,
When a person has shown you that they're committed to misunderstanding you, when a person has shown you that they're not willing to learn, unlearn, relearn, when a person has shown you consistently over the years that they are not willing to do better, regardless of how much you raise an issue, regardless of how much they've hurt you and how much you've expressed that they've hurt you, then for me, that particular situation is what we call a dead situation. And the saddest thing ever is that so many people keep wearing those rings, so many people stay in those situations under the guise of, I'm staying for the kids, etc. What you don't realize, and what professionals like myself will tell you, is that you do more harm to the children by staying in such a toxic situation than by walking away. That's one. Number two, you are dying every single day in that particular relationship because of the amount of toxicity in that relationship, because of the amount of abuse in that relationship, but also even because of the amount of reckless abandon with which this person treats you. So, at what point do you then choose to love yourself? At what point does self preservation take over? At what point do you then realize that you owe it to yourself to be happy? You owe it to yourself to be respected, to be seen, and to be heard.
thank you.
By the way,
Yes.
narcissism is a serious disease, and many of those people are undiagnosed, and many of those people would never actually acknowledge that they have that problem. But you're essentially sitting with a mental health patient without even realizing it and without having the tools to cope with that situation. So it's not an ideal situation. It could actually even end up becoming dangerous because they're so consumed with themselves. Everything is about themselves, and everybody else is wrong except themselves.
Maybe we should talk about it at some point, Sean, because I think, you know, it's a word that people use, but I don't think we really understand the depth of narcissism and
Yep,
how it impacts, you know, and how some people don't even realize that they are with a narcissist, you know,
indeed.
in their relationship. So maybe one of the sessions should be about that. I know we've gone a bit over time, but I think it's an important topic. This one, it's very loaded. You know, as I was writing my notes, I'm like, Ish, you know, this is a topic on its own. This is a topic on its own. The way
Yeah.
it's so loaded, you know, issues of commitment and trust, issues of mutual respect. The one thing that I think a lot of people fail in, I sometimes fail in that area myself, is effective communication. You know, so we do need tools and skills to deal with how to communicate, especially the hard conversations when it's all lovey-dovey and we are talking about our feelings, you know, how I'm so happy, it's easy. But it's the hard conversations where you were saying at the beginning, talk about, you know, your value system, talk about your culture, your religion, talk about all those things that make you who you are. And people don't really engage in such deep conversations. It's usually, what work do you do, you know, what food do you like, the soft things. We never
Yeah.
really get to the hard things, and that's what kills relationship, because when the hard things start coming out, you are way deep in. I agree, you said
Mm,
we are falling, you've fallen in, to the point where getting out is so hard. And that's where now people become compromised and lose themselves in the
true.
relationship, because you are staying sometimes for the sake of, clout, sometimes for the sake of keeping face, because all your friends have relationships, your parents are asking, Kante, well, now what's wrong with you? Sometimes we stay
Mm,
for the wrong reasons. So I really like the idea of having foundational conversations, and really we need to learn how to do that without fearing that if I'm honest, I might lose this person, because sometimes maybe we are not too honest, because already you've picked up that this person doesn't like church. So if I say I'm a believer, they might just leave. So you'll play it
uh-huh.
down and not say, how deep you are a person who believes, you go to church every Sunday, whatever. You'll play it and say, no, I do go to church sometimes and whatever. And now you are at the point where you want this person to join you on your journey, but it's difficult because from the
Mm.
start, you never expressed. So Elroy is saying, I'm thrilled to share my excitement about relationship enrichment. I just learned about this program today and I cannot wait to explore it further. So welcome, Elroy. It's good to know that there are new people still joining us, on this platform. And we do tackle very useful topics, useful in a sense that they are life skills and life learnings that we need to have. So thank you for joining us, and do join us again. You'll always find very interesting topics here. Hunt
Indeed.
is saying, that's why most relationships don't last beyond the honeymoon. The hard stuff is really hard to deal with. And I agree. It's
Which is
hard
why,
to deal with the hard
which
stuff.
is why you need to have chosen, right? Remember when we
Mm,
were speaking about the concept of falling in love vis-a-vis the concept of choosing to love?
yes.
Because when I have chosen, I understand that, okay, this is a difficult season that we're in, but I chose. But
Yeah.
if I fell in, then the second it gets hard, then it's easy for me to fall out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
also understand the fact that the hard conversations are what makes the relationship. So those are very important for us to have.
Yeah.
And this whole honeymoon, etc., that's not the relationship itself. The relationship, someone was saying to me, the thing with marriage is that it's the one test where you get a certificate first before
Mhm.
before the actual test, right?
True.
And a wedding, people spend 150,000, 300,000, etc., for that one day. But that becomes immaterial if the relationship itself, the foundation is shaky, there's no solid foundation, we've not built a foundation, we've not invested in each other, we've not dealt with the hard stuff. In fact, part of the principle should always be, that's why I was saying conflict management. When things are difficult, that's where we need to come together a lot more. But the problem with us as people is that when there are problems, we then tend to start attacking each other as opposed to attacking the problem. So if the problem, for example, is we don't have enough income in the house, then let us deal with the fact that we need to create additional income. It shouldn't then become, yeah, well, now you are lazy. Yeah, why are you not finding a job? We all know the job market is difficult. And if a person is putting in a genuine, effort to try and get employed, but it's not happening, then we should be able to try and find ways around that. But a majority of us, the problem becomes the second there is an issue, we attack each other as opposed to attacking the problem.
True. And that's another thing. Let's attack the problem, not each other, which is
Aha,
even if in a daughter or parent-child relationship, a
indeed.
sibling relationship. When we deal, I always say to people, don't say I hate you if you hate
Mm,
the
mm,
behavior. Be
mm,
clear, I hate this behavior, so that they
mhm.
know you are separating them from the behavior. Because sometimes when we are too angry with people, we use words like I hate you when you actually mean I hate what you are doing or what you've done.
Indeed.
So we need to learn separating issues from the people. Sean, I'm gonna call it a night. As usual, we go through these sessions and time is never enough, but we respect people's time because tomorrow is still a working day, it's a school night, so we want people to continue and wrap up their night. So Elroy, this platform is called In His Grace and Mercy, and the relationship enrichment is a topic that we were dealing with today, like we deal with many others. But it looks like there might be a need, Sean, to
Yes.
continue with the theme of relationship enrichment and take out some of the things and break them down, especially like effective communication. Break it
Yeah.
into pieces. What are the tools? What do we use? How do we correct when we've, messed up in our communication? How do we get back to a point where we can say, reset the button, let's learn how to communicate? Because for some
Not
people,
a not a
yeah.
problem. My parting shot is going to be a quote from Dr. Miles Monroe. Whatever you mismanage, you will lose. Whether it's
Repeat
a
that, please.
relationship, whatever you mismanage, you will lose.
Mm,
So whether it's a relationship, you're not treating your partner well, you're not treating your children well, you're not treating your money well, whatever you mismanage, you will lose. So
lose.
keep that in mind as you go about your dealings on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Sean. And we did apologize in the beginning that we struggled with getting Sean's camera to work. We're not sure why today it's not showing his face, but we appreciate that even with that glitch, we could still have this powerful session as Honzi is appreciating it and thanking you for always giving us these beautiful nuggets that we need in life. Let us close with prayer and ask God, to help our relationships, to strengthen our relationships, to restore our relationship, to restore our faith and our belief in love. Because love is beautiful. As much as it can hurt, it can also be a safe space, can also be something that really makes your life worth living. So let's not let bad experiences, ruin a beautiful thing that has been created. Let us close with prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you, we honor you, we appreciate the time we've had in this session, Lord. Modimo a ka tshegofatsa di-relationship tsa rona mo di gonang le mo go senyegileng, tate re thuse go lokisa. May we be able to go back to a position where we choose the people we love and not just fall in love, Lord. May we choose and choose wisely, guided, discerning, looking at life in general and not just the material things that sometimes are very appealing to the eye. We thank you, Lord, for these lessons. We ask that you bless Sean, bless all of us, and may we meet again, Lord, another time to hear more and learn more in these sessions. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So please remember, the information is there. It has been scrolling on the screen. If you need information how to get in touch with Sean, feel free to write to us and we will connect you with Sean. Thank you very much. Have a great evening and go and love yourself and love the people that you are in relationships with. Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.